The crystal champagne flute caught the golden light as my boss raised it toward me, her smile as sharp as broken glass. "To your promotion," she said. But her eyes whispered something else entirely. I watched her manicured fingers brush against my cocktail glass, a movement so subtle, so deliberate. A small white pill dissolved into the amber liquid. "You're just lucky," she hissed under her breath, pushing the drink toward me. "This should have been mine." In that moment, standing in that upscale Portland restaurant, surrounded by celebrating colleagues, I realized this wasn't about jealousy anymore. This was war. My name is Elena Moreau, and after 12 years of burning my fingers on hot pans and sacrificing sleep for perfect soufflés, I'd finally made it. Head chef at Maison Duval, one of Portland's most prestigious French restaurants. The promotion party should have been the happiest night of my career. But as I stood in the private dining room, surrounded by colleagues raising their glasses, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The restaurant had been transformed for the occasion. Soft jazz floated through the air, mixing with the scent of truffle oil and fresh herbs. Crystal chandeliers cast warm shadows across the faces of my co-workers, their expressions ranging from genuine joy to barely concealed envy. Marcel Duval himself, our distinguished owner with his silver beard and impeccable suit, stood at the head of the room, commanding attention as he always did. "Ladies and gentlemen," Marcel's voice boomed with his slight French accent. "Tonight we celebrate not just talent, but dedication. Elena has proven herself time and again, bringing innovation to our kitchen while respecting tradition." I smiled, accepting the applause, but my eyes were drawn to one person who wasn't clapping. Claudine Bellerose, the executive chef and my former superior, stood near the bar with her arms crossed. At 45, she was still striking. With her platinum blonde hair pulled into a severe chignon and her chef's whites replaced by an elegant black dress. Her lips were pursed in what others might mistake for a smile, but I knew better. I'd worked under her for 3 years, and I'd learned to read every micro-expression on that porcelain face. The bartender had prepared a special cocktail. For the occasion, a French 75 with edible gold flakes, pretentious but beautiful. As Marcel continued his speech, praising my recent menu innovations and the glowing reviews from food critics, I watched Claudine move. She glided toward the bar where my untouched drink sat, her movements fluid and purposeful. Elena's butternut squash velouté has been called transcendent by the Portland Tribune, Marcel was saying, but my attention was entirely on Claudine. She positioned herself between me and the bar, her body blocking most of the room's view. Her hand hovered over my glass for just a moment. Then I saw it. A small, white object dropping from her palm into the golden liquid. She stirred it once with the cocktail stick, the gold flakes swirling to disguise any evidence. My heart hammered against my ribs, but I kept my expression neutral. Years in professional kitchens had taught me to maintain composure even when chaos erupted around me. This was just another kind of heat to handle. Claudine picked up the glass and walked toward me, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor like a countdown. The room seemed to slow as she approached, her ice blue eyes locked on mine. She handed me the drink with a flourish that drew attention from several nearby colleagues. "A special toast," she announced loudly enough for others to hear, her voice honey-sweet with underlying poison. "From one chef to another." She leaned in close, her breath smelling of wine and something bitter. Resentment, perhaps? Her whisper was meant for my ears alone. "You're just lucky. This should have been mine. I've given 15 years to this restaurant while you waltz in with your pretty smile and steal everything." I held the glass, feeling its cool weight in my hand. The condensation made my palm slick. Around us, people were watching, waiting for me to drink, to complete this ceremonial passing of the torch. My mind raced through the options. If I refused, I'd look paranoid or ungrateful. If I accused her without proof, it would be my word against hers. The established executive chef versus the newly promoted upstart. "Thank you, Claudine," I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. "Your mentorship has meant everything." The lie tasted worse than whatever she'd put in that drink would have. Her smile widened, predatory and satisfied. She thought she had me cornered. The room waited, glasses raised, the moment hanging suspended like a knife over my career. I raised the glass to my lips, watching Claudine's eyes glitter with anticipation. But I'd learned more than just cooking techniques in my years climbing the culinary ladder. I'd learned that in this industry, sometimes the best ingredient was patience, and the most important skill was knowing when not to take the bait. The champagne touched my lips, but I didn't swallow, not yet. Because if Claudine wanted to play this game, she'd just made her first mistake. She'd shown her hand too early. And now I knew exactly what kind of chef I was really dealing with. The countryside of Provence shaped me long before I ever touched a professional kitchen knife. I grew up in a stone cottage where lavender grew wild in the garden, and my father, Jean-Pierre Moreau, taught me that cooking was an act of love. He wasn't a trained chef, just a baker in our small village, but his hands could transform simple ingredients into magic. Fresh bread at dawn, delicate pastries that made neighbors line up before sunrise, and Sunday dinners that brought our entire extended family together around a worn wooden table. I was 14 when cancer took him. The morning he died. He was still trying to teach me the perfect temperature for proofing brioche dough. His voice barely a whisper, but his passion undimmed. "Elena," he said, his weathered hand covering mine. "Promise me you'll keep cooking. Promise me you'll remember that food is how we tell people we love them without words." After his death, every dish I made became a conversation with his memory. My mother, devastated by the loss, could barely eat. But I learned to coax her back to life with his recipes. The onion soup he made when she was sad. The lemon tart that celebrated small victories. Cooking became my grief and my healing. My connection to something larger than loss. At 18, I left for culinary school in Lyon, working 3 jobs to pay tuition. My classmates were mostly men who viewed me as either a curiosity or a threat. I learned to be twice as good just to be considered equal. My knife skills had to be faster, my palate more refined, my endurance unshakable. When others partied after class, I practiced brunoise cuts until my fingers bled. When they complained about harsh instructors, I asked for extra shifts in the school's restaurant. America came calling 5 years later with an offer from a Michelin-starred restaurant in New York. I arrived with 2 suitcases and a French accent that marked me as either sophisticated or pretentious, depending on who was listening. The kitchen brigade system in Manhattan was brutal, a hierarchy built on screaming, humiliation, and the kind of pressure that broke people daily. I watched talented cooks wash out after being berated one too many times, saw others turn to cocaine or alcohol to cope with the 16-hour days. But I had my father's ghost teaching me resilience. Every burnt sauce, every screaming chef, every sexist comment about women being too emotional for professional kitchens, I absorbed it all and transformed it into fuel. I moved from garde-manger to saucier, from sous chef to chef de cuisine, earning my scars and my reputation simultaneously. 3 years ago, I came to Portland, drawn by Maison Duval's reputation and Marcel's vision of French cuisine with Pacific Northwest ingredients. But more than that, I was drawn by Claudine Bellarose's story. Here was a woman who'd shattered glass ceilings, who'd built her reputation through skill and determination. Her cookbook sat on my nightstand. Her interviews inspired me through my toughest moments. Meeting her was like biting into what you think is chocolate only to discover it's unsweetened cocoa, bitter and shocking. The woman I'd idolized was a master manipulator who viewed other women in the kitchen not as allies but as threats to be eliminated. She'd critique my techniques in front of the entire staff, finding fault with dishes that Marcel praised. She'd schedule me for impossible split shifts, hoping exhaustion would lead to mistakes. When food critics requested to try my seasonal menu, she'd suddenly develop urgent tasks that kept me away from the past during service. I remember the night I finally understood her game. A female sous chef named Marie had just quit after 6 months of Claudine's psychological warfare, constant undermining disguised as mentorship, impossible standards that shifted daily, and rumors spread with surgical precision. As Marie cleaned out her locker, tears streaming down her face, she looked at me and said, "She only supports women until they become competition. Then she destroys them." But I didn't come this far to be destroyed. My father had taught me that cooking required patience, waiting for bread to rise, for stalks to develop depth, for flavors to meld. I applied that same patience to Claudine, documenting every slight, every sabotage, building my reputation dish by dish while she tried to tear it down. The promotion to head chef hadn't been luck. Despite what Claudine believed, it had been earned through every 16-hour shift, every perfect plate sent out despite her interference, every innovation that brought recognition to Maison Duval. Marcel had seen through her careful manipulations, had recognized that the restaurant's recent success coincided with my contributions, not hers. Standing in that celebration party, holding a poisoned drink from the woman I'd once admired, I realized that all those years of struggle had prepared me for exactly this moment. Claudine thought she was dealing with another victim, another woman she could bully out of her territory. She had no idea she was facing someone forged in the fires of a dozen kitchens. Someone who'd learned that the best revenge isn't served cold. It's served with perfect technique and impeccable timing. The war in Maison Duval's kitchen began the Monday after my promotion, waged with weapons only those in our profession would recognize. Claudine arrived early, 5 a.m. instead of her usual 7, to establish dominance in what had been my domain for 3 years. I found her reorganizing the walk-in cooler, moving my carefully labeled ingredients to the back, placing items near their expiration dates where I typically grab fresh products first. "Just helping you settle into your new role," she said sweetly, loud enough for the morning prep cooks to hear. "Leadership requires delegation. Elena, you shouldn't be concerning yourself with inventory anymore." But when service began that night, I discovered the real damage. The microgreens I'd ordered specifically for the evening's amuse-bouche had been accidentally left out overnight, wilted beyond use. The sauce I'd prepared for the duck confit had somehow acquired an overwhelming amount of salt, enough to ruin the entire batch. The new molecular gastronomy equipment I'd requested had mysteriously disappeared, later found hidden behind cases of wine in the basement storage. "Such a shame about the mise en place," Claudine commented during the dinner rush, watching me scramble to prepare replacement sauce while managing 5 other active stations. "Perhaps you weren't quite ready for this level of responsibility." The kitchen staff watched our interactions like spectators at a blood sport. Some, like Thomas the guard manger and Sarah the pastry chef, remained loyal to me, having witnessed Claudine's machinations over the years. Others, particularly the old guard who'd worked under Claudine for a decade, seemed to enjoy watching the new boss struggle. But there were those in the middle, the swing votes whose allegiance would determine whether I could effectively run this kitchen. Marcus, our poissonnier, began, forgetting, to inform me when the best catches arrived, instead alerting Claudine first. Julie, who ran the meat station, started questioning my temperature specifications in front of the younger cooks, undermining my authority with surgical precision. Claudine's masterstroke came through rumor, like a disease spreading through the kitchen's bloodstream. Whispers began circulating about my real reason for promotion. She never said anything directly, that would be too obvious. Instead, she'd sigh dramatically when Marcel visited the kitchen, mentioning how some people had advantages, others didn't. She'd wonder aloud whether my success with certain dishes came from my own innovation or from recipes I'd borrowed from my time in New York. "I heard she was fired from Le Bernardin," someone whispered during prep one afternoon, not realizing I was in the adjacent storage room. Claudine says she knows the real story. The truth was I'd left Le Bernardin on excellent terms with a glowing recommendation. But truth was a fragile ingredient in a kitchen full of sharp knives and sharper tongues. Despite the sabotage, my food spoke louder than gossip. The Portland food scene was small but influential, and word traveled fast when someone was doing something special. My pan-seared scallops with cauliflower puree and truffle foam had food bloggers making reservations weeks in advance. The deconstructed bouillabaisse I'd created as a seasonal special had the Portland Tribune's food critic, James Morrison, declaring it a revelation that honors tradition while fearlessly embracing innovation. Each positive review was a knife twist in Claudine's pride. She'd stand at the pass during service, watching plates of my creations fly out to eager diners. Her jaw clenched so tight I worried she'd crack her veneers. When Marcel would bring VIP guests back to tour the kitchen, praising Elena's vision for the restaurant's future, Claudine's smile would freeze into something that belonged in a horror film. The breaking point came on a Thursday night, 3 weeks into my new position. A group of influential food writers from Eater had made a surprise visit, and I'd prepared a special tasting menu showcasing what I called Nouvelle Rustique, elevated comfort foods with French technique. The kitchen was humming with perfect synchronization, every station hitting their marks. When Claudine struck, she appeared at the sauce station just as I was finishing the red wine reduction for the beef short ribs, our centerpiece dish. "Let me help," she insisted, shouldering me aside with practiced authority. Before I could stop her, she'd added what looked like additional wine but smelled wrong. Corked, turned to vinegar. The entire batch was ruined with 5 minutes until plating. "Oh, Elena," she gasped theatrically, ensuring everyone heard. "What happened? This sauce is completely wrong. Did you not check the wine before adding it?" I stood there, watching her performance, feeling the eyes of my entire team on me. The food writers were waiting. Marcel was in the dining room with them. This was the moment Claudine had been building toward, public humiliation that would justify her whispered campaign about my incompetence. But she'd underestimated one thing. Every cook in that kitchen had tasted my original reduction during prep. They knew what it was supposed to taste like. And Thomas, loyal Thomas, had been watching from garde-manger. He cleared his throat. "Chef Bellerose," he said quietly but firmly, "I saw you add that bottle from the back shelf, the one we set aside for disposal yesterday." The kitchen went silent except for the hiss of flames and bubble of simmering stalks. Claudine's face cycled through emotions, shock, rage, then settling into cold calculation. She hadn't expected anyone to speak up. She'd counted on the kitchen's traditional hierarchy, where challenging a superior was career suicide. But my months of leading through skill rather than intimidation had earned something Claudine never understood: genuine loyalty. Sarah stepped forward with backup sauce she'd seen me start earlier, just in case. Marcus suddenly remembered he had beautiful John Dory that would make an excellent substitution if needed. One by one, my team moved to support me, not with words, but with action. We served the food writers a meal they'd later describe as flawless and inspirational. But as I watched Claudine retreat to her office, I knew this was far from over. She'd shown she was willing to destroy the restaurant's reputation to destroy me. The question was, how far was I willing to go to stop her? The champagne flute remained in my hand at the promotion party, Claudine's eyes boring into me with predatory anticipation. The bubbles rose through the golden liquid, carrying with them whatever pharmaceutical surprise she'd dropped in. Around us, the party continued, laughter, conversation, the clink of glasses. But for Claudine and me, the world had narrowed to this moment. I raised the glass higher, as if making a toast. And that's when I saw Rebecca from HR approaching with her own empty glass. Perfect timing. Rebecca was notorious for her inability to refuse a drink and her tendency to sample everyone else's cocktails at office parties. "Rebecca," I called out warmly, turning slightly. "You have to try this special cocktail Claudine had made for me. It's absolutely extraordinary." Before Claudine could react, I pressed the glass into Rebecca's eager hands. "I shouldn't have any more on an empty stomach," I said apologetically. "But please, enjoy it." Claudine put so much thought into it. Claudine's face went through a spectacular transformation, the satisfied smirk melting into panic, then forcing itself back into a strained smile. She couldn't object without raising suspicions. Rebecca was already taking a generous sip, commenting on the lovely gold flakes. "Delicious," Rebecca exclaimed, then took another larger gulp. Claudine's hand twitched as if she wanted to snatch the glass away. I watched Rebecca carefully while maintaining casual conversation with other colleagues. Within 15 minutes, she was swaying slightly, her words beginning to slur. By the 20-minute mark, she was clutching the bar for support, her face flushed and confused. I don't feel right, Rebecca mumbled, her eyes unfocused. Just had 2 drinks. Marcel noticed immediately, his host instincts kicking in. Rebecca, are you all right? The room is spinning, she said. Then her legs buckled. Thomas and I caught her before she hit the floor. Call 911, Marcel commanded, his voice cutting through the party chatter. The celebration atmosphere evaporated instantly. As Thomas supported Rebecca's weight, I noticed her pupils were dilated, her pulse racing under my fingers as I checked her wrist. What did she have to drink? Someone asked. Just wine earlier, Rebecca's assistant said, worried. And that cocktail Elena gave her. That Claudine made, I corrected firmly, meeting Claudine's eyes across the chaos. The special one she prepared specifically for me. The paramedics arrived within minutes, their professional assessment quick and disturbing. Looks like she's been drugged, one said quietly to Marcel, but not quietly enough. We see this with Rohypnol, GHB, similar substances. Was she drinking from her own glass all evening? All eyes turned to the champagne flute, now lying on its side on the bar, the last drops of golden liquid pooling on the dark wood. Claudine stepped forward, her voice steady but too high-pitched. This is ridiculous. It must have been something she took herself, or maybe someone else. That was meant to be my drink, I said clearly, letting each word fall like a stone into still water. Claudine made it specially for me, insisted I drink it for our toast. Marcel's expression darkened, his gaze moving between Claudine and me. He was a shrewd businessman who'd built his restaurant empire by reading people, and something in this situation was clearly not sitting right with him. The next few days were a careful dance. Rebecca recovered fully, though she couldn't remember anything after drinking the cocktail. HR launched a quiet investigation, but without concrete proof, it went nowhere. Claudine had been careful. No witnesses to the actual drugging, no trace of the substance on her person, no evidence beyond my word. But the seed of doubt had been planted. Marcel watched Claudine more closely now. Other staff members whispered about the incident, wondering why Claudine had been so insistent about that particular drink. The story spread through Portland's restaurant community like flames through dry wood, modified in the telling, of course, but always with the same core. Something suspicious had happened at Elena Moreau's promotion party, and Claudine Bellerose was at the center of it. Claudine's response was to double down on her psychological warfare. She began requiring quality control tastes of every dish I prepared, claiming it was for the restaurant's standards. She'd stand beside me during service, loudly correcting techniques that needed no correction, undermining my authority with every word. Your knife skills seem shaky today. Elena, she'd announced during prep. Perhaps the pressure is getting to you. No shame in stepping down if you're not ready. But I had learned something crucial from the cocktail incident. Claudine was desperate enough to take serious risks. The controlled, calculating executive chef was starting to crack under the pressure of her own jealousy. She'd shown she was willing to drug me in a room full of witnesses. What else might she be capable of? I started documenting everything, taking photos of my mise en place before and after shifts, keeping detailed logs of inventory, having Thomas or Sarah witness my prep work. It felt paranoid. But paranoia was a survival skill when someone was actively trying to destroy you. Late one night, after everyone else had gone home, I found Claudine in the kitchen, standing over my prep for the next day's special. She had a bottle in her hand, unlabeled, containing clear liquid. She startled when she saw me, quickly pocketing the bottle. Just checking your work, she said smoothly. Can't be too careful with health standards. Of course not, I agreed, making a mental note to throw out everything she'd been near. We wouldn't want anyone else to get sick. The threat hung between us, unspoken but clear. She knew I knew. I knew she knew I knew. We were locked in a chess game where the stakes were our careers, our reputations, possibly even our freedom if things escalated further. But chess was a game of patience and strategy. And I'd learned from the best. My father, who taught me that the most important ingredient in any recipe was timing. Claudine had made her moves too aggressively, too obviously. Now it was time to let her desperation lead her into a mistake she couldn't explain away. The only question was, how far would she go before she realized she was cooking her own downfall? The whispers started small, like the first wisps of smoke before a grease fire. Elena seems stressed lately, someone mentioned in passing. Did you notice her hands shaking during prep? Another added. Within a week, the narrative had evolved into something more sinister. Elena Moreau was cracking under pressure, possibly unstable, maybe even dangerous in the kitchen. Claudine was a master of the concerned colleague act. She'd pull people aside with that practiced look of worry, touching their arm gently as she confided. I'm concerned about Elena. She's been making strange accusations, seems paranoid. Yesterday, she threw out an entire batch of perfectly good prep, claiming it was contaminated. Such a waste. She never said the word crazy directly. That would be too obvious, too actionable. Instead, she painted a picture with carefully chosen observations. She documents everything obsessively. She'd mentioned to Marcel during management meetings. Takes photos of her station every 5 minutes. It's unsettling for the other staff. The gaslighting was surgical in its precision. She'd move my knife slightly to the left when I wasn't looking, then express concern when I couldn't find it immediately. She'd change the temperature on the sous vide when I stepped away, then question my memory when the proteins came out wrong. Once, she even altered my prep list after I'd written it, adding impossible quantities that made me look incompetent when I couldn't complete them. Elena, this says you needed to prepare 50 pounds of Brunoise carrots, she announced loudly during morning prep. Holding up the list, I knew I'd written differently. That's excessive for tonight's covers. Are you feeling all right? The kitchen staff began watching me with a mixture of pity and wariness. Even my allies like Thomas and Sarah started second-guessing my decisions, wondering if perhaps the promotion had been too much too soon. When I tried to explain what Claudine was doing, it only made me look more paranoid. She's manipulating all of you, I said during a staff meeting when Claudine was supposedly in a vendor meeting. But the looks I received, sympathetic, uncomfortable, disbelieving, told me I was losing the narrative war. Marcel called me into his office on a rain-soaked Tuesday afternoon. The concern in his eyes was genuine, which made it worse somehow. Elena, I need to ask you directly. Are you struggling? Claudine has raised some concerns about your behavior, and frankly, some of the staff have come to me independently. Marcel, she drugged Rebecca at my promotion party. You were there. You saw. I saw Rebecca have an adverse reaction to alcohol, he interrupted gently. The hospital found no evidence of drugging. Rebecca herself says she probably just drank too much on an empty stomach. I wanted to scream. Claudine had gotten to Rebecca too, probably convinced her that pursuing any investigation would only embarrass her professionally. But protesting would only make me seem more unhinged. I'm giving you the benefit of the doubt, Marcel continued. You're talented, Elena. But I need stability in my kitchen. If you can't work with Claudine professionally, the threat was clear. Make this work or leave. That night, Claudine escalated her campaign. She scheduled me for an impossible split shift, 4 a.m. to noon, then 4 p.m. to midnight, claiming it was necessary for transitional oversight. She assigned me to work every station in rotation to maintain connection with all aspects of the kitchen, ensuring I could never establish rhythm or routine. She required detailed written reports on every dish prepared, every ingredient used, every interaction with staff, bureaucratic torture designed to exhaust me into mistakes. My apartment became a war room. The walls were covered with schedules, attempting to track Claudine's patterns. When did she arrive? When did she leave? What were her routines? If I couldn't fight her psychological warfare directly, maybe I could find something else, some weakness, some mistake she'd made that had nothing to do with me. It was Sarah who inadvertently gave me the key. She mentioned offhandedly that Claudine had been researching food allergies lately, spending hours on medical websites during slow periods. She's probably just being thorough, Sarah said. You know how she is about dietary restrictions. But something nagged at me. Claudine had never shown particular interest in allergen protocols before. We had systems in place, ones she'd largely ignored in favor of what she called real cooking for people who could appreciate it. I started paying attention to what she was researching. Shellfish allergies, nut allergies, the severity of anaphylactic reactions. She'd bookmarked articles about famous chefs who'd accidentally poisoned critics. She'd printed information about cross-contamination that went far beyond our standard safety protocols. Then I overheard her on the phone one afternoon, thinking she was alone in the office. Yes, I understand, Mr. Grant has a severe walnut allergy. No walnuts in anything. Of course. Victor Grant. The name sent electricity through my spine. He was Portland's most influential food critic, the one whose reviews could make or destroy a restaurant overnight. He was coming to Maison Duval next week for our autumn menu tasting. That evening, I snuck into Claudine's office after she'd left. Her desk was typically immaculate, but the bottom drawer was locked, unusual for someone who claimed to value transparency in leadership. Using skills I'd learned from a line cook in New York who'd had a questionable past. I managed to pick the simple lock. Inside was a leather journal, filled with Claudine's precise handwriting. Most of it was standard, vendor contacts, recipe modifications, staff notes. But the last few pages made my blood run cold. She detailed Victor Grant's medical history, somehow obtained through a contact at his allergist's office. Not just his walnut allergy, but the specific proteins he reacted to, the severity of his symptoms, how quickly anaphylaxis set in. She'd researched which oils contained trace amounts of walnut proteins, which dishes could mask the flavor, how cross-contamination could be explained as an accident. The final entry, dated yesterday, was a menu plan for Grant's visit. Every dish was built around ingredients that could easily hide walnut oil. The sauce for the duck would use a brown butter base with depth. The salad dressing called for mixed nut oil for complexity. Even the dessert, a chocolate soufflé, had a note about enhancing with praline essence. She wasn't just planning to sabotage my career anymore. She was planning to kill a man and frame me for it. After all, everyone knew I was unstable, paranoid, cracking under pressure. Who would believe it wasn't a tragic accident caused by a stressed, incompetent chef? I photographed every page with shaking hands, my mind racing. Going to Marcel wouldn't work. Claudine would claim I'd planted it. Another sign of my deteriorating mental state. The police would need more than a journal to act. No. If I wanted to stop her, I'd need to catch her in the act, with witnesses she couldn't discredit or manipulate. The hunter was about to become the hunted, and she had no idea I'd found her trap before she could spring it. The photographs of Claudine's journal burned in my phone like evidence of a crime not yet committed. I spent the next 3 days pretending everything was normal while meticulously planning my counter-strike. Victor Grant's reservation was for Friday night, a special 8-course tasting menu that would showcase Maison Duval's autumn offerings. Claudine had already announced she would personally oversee the preparation, to ensure everything meets our highest standards. I needed allies, but they had to be people Claudine couldn't manipulate or dismiss. Marcel was still under her spell of concerned professionalism. The kitchen staff had been turned against me. But there were others who operated outside Claudine's sphere of influence. First, I reached out to James Morrison from the Portland Tribune, the critic who'd praised my work. We met at a coffee shop in Southeast Portland, far from any restaurant industry eyes. I need you to understand something, I told him, sliding my phone across the table. What you're about to see could destroy my career if I'm wrong. But if I'm right, staying silent could cost someone their life. His expression shifted from skepticism to horror as he scrolled through the images. She's planning to poison Victor Grant. Look at the dates, the research, the specificity. This isn't curiosity. It's premeditation. James was quiet for a long moment. What do you need from me? Witnesses, credible ones, people who can't be dismissed as hysterical or biased. The second person I contacted was Dr. Emily Harrison, an allergist who consulted for several Portland restaurants on safety protocols. I'd met her at a food safety seminar months ago. She agreed to come for Friday's service as a routine observation that Marcel couldn't object to. The third was unexpected. Rebecca from HR. She approached me Thursday afternoon, her expression troubled. Elena, I need to tell you something. After the party, Claudine visited me in the hospital. She convinced me I just had too much to drink. That pursuing any investigation would make me look unprofessional. But I know my limits. I've been thinking about it for weeks, and I believe you. Something was in that drink. Would you be willing to document that conversation and be present Friday night? She nodded firmly. I'll bring David from legal. We'll frame it as observing kitchen dynamics for a workplace culture assessment. Friday arrived gray and drizzling, Portland showing its typical autumn mood. The kitchen buzzed with nervous energy. Victor Grant's reviews were career-defining moments. Claudine arrived early, taking control of the prep with military precision. She'd assigned me to garnish and plating, insulting for a head chef but perfect for her plan. If anything went wrong, I'd be the last person to touch the food. Elena, I'll handle the sauces personally, she announced. We can't afford any mistakes tonight. I watched her work, noting how she kept her body between the sauce station and everyone else, how her hands moved with practiced deception. The walnut oil appeared during the fifth course prep, labeled innocuously as specialty oil in a clear bottle. Claudine, I called out, loud enough for the entire kitchen to hear. I should check that oil for the sauce. We need to be careful about allergens tonight. She spun around, her face flushed. I've been doing this for 15 years. I think I know how to check for allergens. Of course, but given Mr. Grant's severe walnut allergy, how did you... She caught herself, but not quickly enough. The kitchen had gone quiet. I'm aware of his restrictions. Doctor? Harrison stepped closer to the pass, her observational visit suddenly very focused. Rebecca and David from legal exchanged glances. James Morrison, who'd arrived early to interview the chef before service, had his phone discreetly recording. Claudine's hands trembled slightly as she returned to the sauce. I saw the moment she made her decision, the slight turn of her wrist as she reached for the walnut oil. But this time, Thomas was watching too. And Zara. And Marcus. Chef Bellerose, Thomas said sharply. That's walnut oil. She froze, the bottle suspended over the pan. No, it's... I can see the label from here, Sarah interjected. It says walnut oil. Claudine's mask finally cracked. You're mistaken. This is hazelnut oil. Completely different proteins. Actually, Dr. Harrison stepped forward, her credentials badge visible. Walnut and hazelnut allergies often cross-react. Anyone with a severe walnut allergy should avoid all tree nuts. As a consulting allergist, I'm afraid I need to intervene here. The bottle slipped from Claudine's hand, shattering on the floor. The oil spread across the tiles like spilled blood, its nutty scent unmistakable. The entire kitchen stood frozen, the reality of what almost happened settling over everyone like a shroud. Marcel appeared in the doorway, having been alerted by the commotion. His eyes took in the scene, the broken bottle, Claudine's pale face, the circle of witnesses, Dr. Harrison's official presence. Someone explain what's happening in my kitchen, he commanded. Chef Bellerose was about to use walnut oil in Mr. Grant's sauce, Thomas said quietly but clearly. Despite knowing about his severe allergy? That's ridiculous. Claudine's voice had risen to near hysteria. Elena must have switched the bottles. She's been trying to frame me, just like she did with Rebecca at the party. She's unstable, paranoid. Ask anyone. But the kitchen remained silent. No one came to her defense. The weeks of manipulation, the drugging incident, the constant psychological warfare, it all crystallized in this moment. I think, James Morrison said, stepping forward with his press credentials visible. We need to have a very serious conversation about what just happened here. And I believe the health department will be very interested in this incident. Claudine looked around wildly, searching for allies, for escape, for any way to salvage the situation. But she'd burned every bridge in her desperation to destroy me. The master manipulator had finally manipulated herself into a corner she couldn't escape. "This isn't over," she hissed at me, her composure completely shattered. "You think you've won? You have no idea what I'm capable of." "Actually," Rebecca interrupted, holding up her phone, "I think we're getting a pretty clear idea. And it's all being documented." The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the steady sizzle of abandoned preparations on the stove. Victor Grant's dinner would need to be rescheduled, but he'd never know how close he'd come to becoming a casualty in Claudine's war against me. The rescheduled evening for Victor Grant's visit arrived with the weight of a final judgment. Marcel had insisted on proceeding despite the previous week's near catastrophe, determined to salvage Maison Duval's reputation. Claudine, incredibly, was still employed. Marcel's lawyers had advised against immediate termination pending a full investigation. She moved through the kitchen like a wounded predator, dangerous in her desperation. "I'll be handling Mr. Grant's courses personally tonight," she announced that afternoon, her voice carrying forced authority. "Elena will observe, for quality control." The dining room had been carefully orchestrated. Marcel positioned himself at a table with a clear view of the kitchen's pass. Dr. Harrison had returned, this time as an official health department observer. Rebecca and David from legal occupied a corner booth, their presence explained as a workplace assessment. James Morrison sat at the bar, ostensibly reviewing cocktails but with perfect sightlines to the kitchen door. What Claudine didn't know was that I'd spent the morning with Victor Grant himself. He'd called me after James Morrison had privately informed him about the previous incident. "I'd like to understand exactly what happened," he'd said, his voice carrying the gravitas that made restaurateurs tremble. Over coffee, I'd shown him everything: the journal photos, the witness statements, the pattern of escalation. "And she's still working there?" His disbelief was palpable. "Marcel needs ironclad proof of intent, not just negligence. Tonight, she'll provide it." Victor had agreed to play his part, though his hands shook slightly as we discussed the plan. "I'm trusting you with my life, Chef Moreau." Now, watching Claudine prepare his first course, I saw her confidence returning. She believed she'd intimidated everyone into silence. That fear of her connections in the industry would keep us compliant. She moved with renewed precision, each plate a small artwork of autumn vegetables and delicate foams. "Beautiful presentation," I commented, stepping closer to observe. She smirked. "Watch and learn." The first 3 courses passed without incident. Claudine was performing for the audience she knew was watching: Marcel, the legal team, the health inspector. Every move was textbook perfect, every plate pristine. She was rebuilding her narrative, the consummate professional falsely accused by an unstable subordinate. The 4th course was when she made her move. "Elena, fetch me the finishing oil from the walk-in," she commanded. "The one in the blue bottle." I knew there was no blue bottle. This was her trap: leave the station so she could contaminate the dish unobserved, then blame me for whatever happened. But I was ready. "Of course, chef," I replied, walking toward the cooler. But instead of entering, I stopped just out of sight, where Thomas had positioned a mirror that gave me a clear view of her station. Claudine glanced around, confirming no one was watching her directly. From her pocket, she produced a small vial, different from before, more subtle. She uncapped it with practiced ease, ready to drizzle its contents over Victor's risotto. That's when Victor himself walked into the kitchen. "I wanted to compliment the chef personally," he announced, his presence commanding immediate attention. Claudine's hand jerked, the vial visible for just a moment before she tried to pocket it. But Dr. Harrison was already moving, her official capacity giving her authority. "Chef Bellerose, please remain where you are and place whatever is in your hand on the counter." "This is ridiculous." "Now!" Marcel's voice cut through her protest. He'd entered behind Victor, flanked by security he'd quietly hired for the evening. Slowly, Claudine placed the vial on the stainless steel counter. The liquid inside was clear, innocuous-looking. "It's just truffle oil," she said desperately. "A special finishing touch." Dr. Harrison produced a testing kit from her bag, the kind used for rapid allergen detection. "Then you won't mind if I test it?" The kitchen held its breath as she worked. The test strip changed color almost immediately, positive for walnut proteins. "This concentration," Dr. Harrison said quietly, "would have triggered anaphylaxis within minutes." Victor Grant stepped forward, his face pale but determined. "I want to be very clear about what just happened. This woman attempted to poison me, in front of witnesses, again." Claudine's collapse was complete and spectacular. "He destroyed my life," she screamed, pointing at me. 15 years I gave to this industry. And he just walked in and took everything. You don't understand. I earned this. I sacrificed everything." "So you decided to sacrifice Mr. Grant?" Marcel's disgust was evident. "And frame Elena for it? She deserves it." Claudine was beyond reason now, years of suppressed rage erupting. "These young chefs, they think talent is enough. They don't understand what I went through. What I had to endure to get here. The harassment, the discrimination. The nights I cried in the walk-in because another male chef got promoted over me despite being half as good. And then she appears, with her fancy techniques and social media following, and suddenly none of my experience matters." For a moment, I felt a flicker of sympathy. I understood that pain, that frustration. But then I remembered Rebecca unconscious at my promotion party, the weeks of gaslighting, the attempted murder she'd planned to pin on me. "I went through it too," I said quietly. "Every female chef in this room has, but we don't poison people because of it." The police arrived as Claudine was still ranting about unfairness and stolen opportunities. As they read her rights, she looked at me with such hatred that I actually stepped back. "This isn't over," she said, even as the handcuffs clicked. "You'll never be safe in this industry. I have friends, connections. Every kitchen you ever work in, someone will remember what you did to me." "No," Marcel said firmly. "They'll remember what you did to yourself." As the police led her away, the kitchen remained frozen in the aftermath. Then, slowly, Thomas started clapping. Sarah joined him, then Marcus, and the rest of the line, until the entire kitchen was applauding, not in celebration, but in relief. The tyranny was over. Victor Grant extended his hand to me. "I believe I'm owed a dinner, Chef Moreau, your menu, your way, without anyone trying to kill me." "It would be my honor," I replied, then turned to my team. My true team. "Let's cook." The kitchen erupted into controlled chaos as we prepared Victor Grant's replacement dinner. This time, the energy was different, electric with purpose rather than poisoned by fear. Every member of my team moved with synchronized precision, the way a kitchen should operate when trust flows as freely as the orders from the pass. "Behind hot," Thomas called out, carrying scorching plates with the grace of a dancer. "Heard," came the automatic response from 3 voices simultaneously. I stood at the pass, expediting with the clarity that comes from surviving trial by fire. Each dish that went out was a declaration. This is what Maison Duval could be without toxic leadership, without fear, without the constant threat of sabotage. Marcel had taken his position by the kitchen door, watching with an expression I'd never seen before, pride mixed with profound regret. He'd built this restaurant but had been blind to the rot at its core. Between courses, he approached me. "Elena, I owe you an apology. I should have seen what was happening. I chose reputation over truth, stability over justice." "You saw it when it mattered most," I replied, sending out the 5th course, seared duck breast with cherry reduction, a dish I'd perfected while Claudine was trying to destroy me. The news of Claudine's arrest spread through Portland's culinary scene like flames through brandy. James Morrison's article in the Portland Tribune didn't just cover the attempted poisoning, he'd conducted a deeper investigation, interviewing former employees who'd suffered under Claudine's reign. 3 former sous chefs came forward with their own stories of sabotage and psychological abuse. The woman who'd claimed to be breaking barriers had been pulling the ladder up behind her. "Chef Moreau," Victor Grant's voice carried from the dining room. "Could you join me for a moment?" I walked out to find him standing, his glass raised. The entire restaurant had gone quiet. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his critic's voice carrying natural authority. "Tonight, I experienced something unprecedented in my 20 years of food criticism. I witnessed a chef not only save my life, but transform a kitchen from a battlefield into a symphony. The meal I've just enjoyed wasn't just technically excellent, it was infused with something rare in fine dining. Joy." He turned to me directly. "Your butternut squash velouté made me remember why I became a food critic. Your duck was poetry. But more importantly, your leadership in the face of attempted murder was extraordinary. Maison Duval has found its true chef." The applause was deafening. Through the kitchen window, I could see my team. Thomas, Sarah, Marcus, and the others, cheering and embracing. We'd survived together. 3 weeks later, I stood in the kitchen as news cameras recorded the scene. Claudine had been sentenced to 15 years for attempted murder. Her reputation destroyed more thoroughly than she'd ever tried to destroy mine. The story had gone national. A cautionary tale about ambition curdled into malevolence. But I didn't want to be defined by what Claudine had done. I wanted to be known for what we built after she was gone. "From today," I announced to the assembled media, "Maison Duval is implementing a revolutionary mentorship program. Every senior chef will be required to sponsor and train a junior chef, particularly women and minorities who've been traditionally excluded from fine dining's upper echelons. We're breaking the cycle of abuse that's plagued professional kitchens for generations." Marcel nodded approvingly from beside me. He'd given me complete creative control and a partnership stake in the restaurant, his way of making amends. "Chef Moreau," a reporter called out, "do you forgive Claudine Bellerose?" I thought about the question carefully. I understand her pain. The industry has been cruel to women, forcing us to compete instead of collaborate. But understanding isn't forgiveness. She tried to murder an innocent man and destroy my life. That's not a response to oppression, it's perpetuating it. As the cameras rolled, capturing this moment of transformation, I thought about my father. He'd taught me that cooking was an act of love, a way to nourish people without words. Claudine had turned it into a weapon. But weapons can be beaten into plowshares, and poisoned kitchens can be healed. That evening, service ran flawlessly. The new system we'd implemented, built on respect rather than fear, had transformed Maison Duval into what it always should have been. Young cooks learned without being screamed at. Mistakes were teaching moments, not opportunities for humiliation. And the food? It had never been better. As I stood at the pass, watching my team work with genuine smiles on their faces, Sarah approached with a cocktail, champagne with gold flakes, identical to the one from my promotion party. "We thought you should finally get to enjoy your celebration drink," she said, grinning. I raised the glass, this time knowing exactly what was in it. Nothing but good champagne and the promise of a future free from fear. Around me, my kitchen family raised their own glasses in response. "To surviving," Thomas called out. "To thriving," Sarah added. "To cooking with love, not fear," I concluded, my father's spirit alive in every word. As I sipped the cocktail, Claudine's final threat echoed in my memory. "You'll never be safe in this industry." She was wrong. I'd never been safer. Surrounded by people who'd stood with me against tyranny, who'd chosen courage over complicity. The kitchen returned to its rhythm, the controlled chaos of service flowing around me like a familiar dance. Claudine was gone, her legacy of fear dismantled plate by plate, service by service, and in its place, we were building something better. A kitchen where talent could flourish without being poisoned by jealousy. Where mentorship replaced manipulation. Where the only thing we put in the food was passion. My phone buzzed with a text from Victor Grant. 3 stars. Review publishes tomorrow. You've earned everyone. I smiled, pocketed the phone, and called out the next order. There was work to do, food to cook, and a new generation of chefs to nurture. The best revenge, I'd learned, wasn't served cold or hot. It was served with excellence, integrity, and the knowledge that you'd refuse to become the monster that tried to devour you. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're tuning in from. Please share in the comments below so we can connect. If this tale of triumph over workplace toxicity resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your own thoughts about justice and revenge in the comments. Your stories and perspectives make this community special.